We've heard a lot so far, and as your host, I'm going to try to synthesize that into a metaphor. The idea that we might come up with a new conceptual superstructure is really exciting, but how do we even start to get there? At this point, I hope it's becoming evident that disclosing the nature of reality and of our beings requires bringing together various sources of knowledge into conversation. To me, it's like putting together a puzzle. We must recognize that there are many puzzle pieces, and that only when we put together the puzzle pieces correctly will we see the picture that someone else wants us to see. Each puzzle piece must be assessed as to where it fits in relationship to the other puzzle pieces. And at times, we have to also assess whether the puzzle piece belongs to this puzzle at all, or perhaps it's left over from your colleague who is working on a different puzzle. To extend the metaphor, the puzzle pieces represent different domains or different sources of knowledge, which some of our discussants were relating to modes of knowing. Considering whether the puzzle pieces fit to the puzzle at hand and how they come together represents assessing the certainty around the data streams coming from a specific domain of knowledge and making interpretive judgments about that evidence. If we are lucky enough to piece together different data streams, and they all have similar epistemic weight, you might be able to see part of the picture come into view. And we've just heard you must be alert to seeing part for the whole. In other words, holding the view that one puzzle piece represents the entire picture, or that there are no other puzzle pieces to be had. We also must recognize that we do not have a templated picture to refer to at the beginning of our inquiry. We cannot check ourselves against a blueprint. Isn't it frustrating when you lose a box the puzzle came in? There indeed is no blueprint. This process is pure discovery. Accordingly, this process requires wisdom and a healthy dose of intellectual humility, which I think is implicit in Professor Davies' reflection here. Dr. Qureshi also speaks to this in his discussion about certainty.
For me, it's one of the very attractive features of Islamic civilization as a whole is that they are able to identify what doctrines and what practices are to be held with this level of certainty. But then they understand that many things we know, how we interpret scripture, and even certain, theological doctrines or legal doctrines are not at that level of certainty. And hence, what that does is to say that we hold certain things in a presumptive manner. What this allows for then is a recognition that there is a possibility of error. And hence, if somebody differs with us, they're able to get along. It doesn't cause communal strife, and they understand that there's a difference of opinion that is all within the Islamic community. One is not excommunicated from the Islamic community by holding a difference of opinion on certain issues, because these are all presumptively held, these particular positions. And so this idea of epistemological humility and epistemological tolerance is introduced.
And this humility enables the epistemological framework to be applied in an even handed manner, regardless of the domain of knowledge. To understand this unified approach to all domains of knowledge, it's important to understand the centrality of knowledge in the Islamic faith and the idea of oneness of knowledge that flows from this.
In the Islamic tradition, the conception of faith is that you must believe in God and the claims of the Prophet Muhammad based on knowledge. You can't be forced to believe something. It has to be based on knowledge. Hence the centrality of knowledge, right, in the Islamic tradition. And what they mean here by knowledge is all types of knowledge, right? So knowledge is considered one, as some of the famous theologians and philosophers have said, that truth cannot contradict truth, right? And so the way to believe in God and to understand his revelation, both they consider the revelation of the book and then the revelation of the world. So the natural world is considered a type of revelation of God as well. He's revealing himself through his creation as well. To understand both, and they're both coming from the same source, which is God, knowledge is a necessary condition.
And keep in mind this beautiful exposition of the oneness of knowledge, while Dr. Qureshi walks us through how this epistemic framework is applied in cases where scientific claims may appear to clash with theological principles.
Both scientific inquiry and theological inquiry, they both have their foundations in rational principles, specifically the principle of non-contradiction. Now, this principle informs both theological inquiry, but also scientific inquiry. And so there is a common ground. The second assumption is that in the Sunni Kalam framework, all empirical, here we mean scientific propositions, we can classify them as rationally possible. That's also the case with transmitted revealed propositions. They're both considered to be rationally possible. And as a consequence of these two assumptions, there can be no genuine conflict between a transmitted revealed proof and a rational, here science, empirical scientific proof. Another assumption that they hold is that empirical scientific propositions, they fall on a range of epistemological strengths. Some of them are known with certainty, while others are presumptively known to varying degrees. And same thing with transmitted or revealed propositions, religious knowledge. That also falls on a range of epistemological strengths. Again, some are known with certainty, and while others are only presumptively known. And the final assumption is that in no scenario, right, should the proofs of each scholarly community should be entirely discarded, right? They have to engage each other, and hence anything that's known with certainty, absolute certainty in the area of science, and anything that's known with absolute certainty in the area of theological knowledge, there can be no genuine conflict at all. And so what this allows for now is that the theologian should look at the best and the most reliable accounts of scientific knowledge when trying to understand how these truths should be engaged and should be understood as well. So I think it really allows for both communities to speak to each other and to build a genuine relationship with each other to understand the type of knowledge that's delivered by each discipline.
I hope you were listening intently there and caught the moment where Dr. Qureshi just appended the whole trope of religion versus science. He has skillfully set out nothing less than a rational epistemological framework which acknowledges that the domain of religion can be incorporated with insights from science. Moreover, that framework does so in a way that does not require us to ignore knowledge from either domain. Dr. Qureshi has just given us a comprehensive and compelling case for the impossibility of true conflict between religious and scientific knowledge. We may perceive conflict, but that doesn't necessarily mean there is an actual conflict about the nature of reality. Back to my metaphor, it could be that we have two pieces of the puzzle that are too far apart to put together, or that one piece is too blurry to be able to understand how it connects to the other one in our hand. There is no need to get dogmatic about what we think we know based on scattered pieces of evidence. Instead, the Islamic epistemic framework consistently reminds us to remain humble and to use wisdom in our conversations, in the hope that together we may build a more complete picture. With that elusive yet compelling bigger picture in mind, we circled back to re-ask the first question we put to Professor Shearers. How is it that we can understand anything at all? And we added, just how is it that the universe can be understood in theories that we can formulate?